The stars stretched out before the human fleet like a sea of endless possibilities, their gleaming ships cutting through the black void of space with purpose. Captain Anders stood on the bridge of the USS Perseverance, staring out at the expanse of the galaxy. This was their first major mission beyond Earth's solar system, and the weight of it felt like 1,000 tons on his shoulders. The fleet consisted of 5 human ships, each equipped with the latest technology humanity had developed. They weren't as large or powerful as the ships of the galactic powers that dominated the universe, but they were fast, precise, and brimming with the daring spirit that humanity was known for. "Captain, we're approaching the coordinates," said Lieutenant Reese, the ship's navigator. His voice broke the tense silence that had settled over the bridge. Anders nodded, his eyes narrowing as the display on the main screen shifted to show a distant, massive fleet ahead. The human ships had come across what they thought was an uninhabited part of space. But now, it was clear that they were wrong. On the screen, a sight they had not anticipated appeared. A fleet of enormous ships, gleaming like steel giants, their sheer size dwarfing the human ships. "Prepare for any contact, all crew on high alert," Anders ordered, his voice steady, betraying no sign of the unease he felt inside. They had prepared for this mission for years, but nothing had prepared them for the vastness of the empire they were about to encounter. Lieutenant Reese quickly analyzed the fleet. "Sir, readings indicate this is the Galactic Empire's 78th Battalion. This is far beyond our expectations." Anders held his breath for a moment, considering the reality of the situation. The Galactic Empire was a name spoken in hushed tones across the galaxy. Known for their ruthless conquest and iron grip over countless worlds, they were a force that few dared to challenge. Yet here, at the very edge of known space, humanity had stumbled into their path. "We need to make contact now," Anders said, his mind racing. This was their moment to show the galaxy that Earth was no longer a backwater planet. They had advanced rapidly in the last century, developing technology and strategies that rivaled anything the Empire might expect from such a young species. They had to stand their ground. Moments later, the comm system hummed to life. A booming voice echoed from the speakers, its tone condescending and cold. "This is Admiral Zorath of the Galactic Empire. Identify yourselves." Anders took a deep breath and stepped forward, his fingers lightly resting on the edge of the console. "This is Captain Anders of the USS Perseverance. We represent Earth, a newly established presence in the galaxy. We come in peace." The silence on the other end of the comm system was palpable. Then the mocking laughter of the Empire's crew filtered through the speakers. "So, the humans have finally crawled out of their cave, have they?" The voice was dripping with sarcasm. "Tell me, Captain Anders, what makes you think your insignificant ships are worth the time of the Galactic Empire?" Anders clenched his jaw but remained calm. He had expected arrogance, but hearing it from someone so powerful was still grating. "We are not here to beg for mercy or apologize for our existence. We simply wish to establish peaceful relations with your empire." Another voice cut through the transmission. "What a joke. Peaceful relations with the Galactic Empire. You're a speck in the grand scheme of things. I'm sure you understand that." The voice was full of amusement now. "You come to us in your tiny ships thinking you matter. How cute." The fleet of human ships held firm, their sensors scanning the Empire's fleet with precision. There was an underlying tension in the air, but Anders was determined. This was their chance to show they were not to be underestimated. Admiral Zorath's voice boomed back through the comm system, now filled with amusement. "Do you honestly believe your fragile ships can stand up to the power of the Empire? I suggest you turn back before we make you regret this encounter. You've made a mistake in thinking you matter." The mockery was unmistakable now. It wasn't just a dismissal, it was a statement of power. The Empire, it seemed, did not take humanity seriously. In their eyes, Earth was just another primitive world that would bow to their will, just another pawn in their game of galactic dominance. Anders's hand tightened around the edge of the console. "We won't turn back, not now, not ever. Humanity has fought too hard to get to where we are. We have nothing to fear from you." The comm line went silent for a moment before Admiral Zorath's voice returned, tinged with mockery. Very well, Captain. We'll allow you to stay, sire, for now. But don't think for 1 second that we're interested in what you have to say. The galaxy has no place for insignificant species like yours. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the bridge of the USS Perseverance eerily silent. Anders turned toward his crew, his face stoic but his mind racing. It was clear now that the Empire viewed them as nothing more than a curiosity, a mistake waiting to happen. Prepare for any response, he ordered. We may have to defend ourselves if they push us. Lieutenant Reese nodded. Yes, Captain. We're ready. The human fleet, outmatched in size, held their ground. They had no choice. They were not turning back. The galaxy might think they were a joke, but humanity was determined to prove them wrong. What they lacked in size and strength, they made up for in sheer willpower and the spark of innovation that had driven their species for centuries. Out in the cold void of space, the Galactic Empire watched, waiting for humanity to make its next move. But little did they know, the humans were not going to be intimidated or crushed by their mockery. They would rise to the challenge, and the galaxy would soon see that the humans were not to be underestimated. The silence in the bridge of the USS Perseverance was thick with tension. The mockery of the Galactic Empire still hung in the air like a bad smell. Captain Anders stood at the front, his arms crossed, staring at the stars on the view screen. His mind raced with what had just happened. The Empire had treated them like insects. It was hard to believe that just moments ago, the same beings who had crushed entire civilizations were laughing at humanity. Lieutenant Reese sat at the navigation console, his eyes focused on the fleet of human ships, their sleek bodies cutting through space in perfect formation. Despite the weight of the situation, Reese couldn't help but feel a flicker of pride. Humanity had come so far, and here they were, face to face with an empire that ruled the stars. And yet, the Empire saw them as nothing more than a joke. We'll be ready, Captain, Reese said, breaking the silence. His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it. But I have to ask, do we have a plan for this? The Empire has thousands of ships. We're outmatched. Anders turned and met his gaze. We didn't come this far to turn back, Lieutenant. We'll have to think on our feet. We might not have the firepower, but we have something they don't, our minds, our ability to adapt. We can use that to our advantage. His voice was filled with determination. He wasn't about to let the arrogance of the Galactic Empire crush their spirit. Humanity had fought too hard for too long to be underestimated. The comm system hummed to life again, and the voice of Admiral Zorath echoed through the bridge. This time, the tone was less mocking, but still dripping with condescension. Captain, Anders, I trust you've thought better of your decision. You're still here, I see, a fool's errand. Anders didn't flinch. We haven't gone anywhere, Admiral. We're still here, and we intend to stay. Another pause. Then Zorath spoke again, this time with a hint of amusement. Very well. You seem determined to meet your end. But if you insist on continuing this charade, I'll give you a small lesson. We'll let you try your advanced technology. But don't think for a second that it'll save you. The transmission cut out abruptly. Anders took a deep breath. He turned to Lieutenant Reese and the rest of the crew, each of them standing tall despite the overwhelming odds. We're going to need to be smarter than they expect, Anders said, his voice strong. Reese, get me a full analysis of their fleet. I want to know everything we can about their ships. Aye, Captain, Reese replied. He quickly tapped on his console, pulling up data on the Empire's massive fleet. They have 4 Dreadnought-class ships in the front lines, Reese said, his voice tense, and at least 12 cruiser-class ships flanking them. If we go head-to-head, we're done. We won't survive. Anders nodded, his mind working. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and yet they were still here. What about their communication system? He asked. Reese's fingers danced across the console, bringing up a new set of data. They're using a standard military comm system, encrypted with a high-level code. If we can break through it, we might be able to disrupt their communication. A small spark of hope flickered in Anders's chest. Get to work on that. Lieutenant, we'll need to buy ourselves some time. Meanwhile, in the Empire's flagship, Admiral Zorath stood before a massive window, gazing out at the human ships that dared to defy them. His bridge officers watched him closely, waiting for orders. Despite the vast difference in power, Zorath's face showed no sign of concern. Instead, there was a look of disdain. Do they think they stand a chance? One of his officers, Commander Rylus, asked, her voice filled with incredulity. Zorath smirked. They are nothing more than a curiosity. Let them play their games. It won't change anything. He turned to face his crew. Prepare to send them a gift, he said coldly. A demonstration of what happens to those who dare challenge the Empire. Let them see the true power of the Galactic Armada. Back on the USS Perseverance, Anders knew time was running out. His crew worked with quiet efficiency, each person playing their part. The fear that had once been in their hearts had melted away, replaced with a fierce resolve. The Galactic Empire may have mocked them, but now it was their turn to show the universe that humanity wasn't to be dismissed. Anders watched as Lieutenant Reese typed furiously on his console, his fingers a blur. I've got it, Reese said with a hint of triumph. I've broken through their encryption. We can now jam their communications for a limited time. Perfect, Anders replied. Activate the jammer and get the fleet into position. The fleet of human ships shifted into a more tactical formation, closing the distance between them and the Empire's ships. The comms were dead silent on both sides. For the first time, the Empire couldn't control the flow of communication. We're ready, Captain, Reese said. Now what? Anders stood tall, staring at the massive fleet before them. Now we show them that humanity does not fear. We'll outsmart them. The human ships activated their cloaking devices, slipping into the shadows of space, blending in with the stars. The Empire, still under the false belief that the humans were helpless, did not notice the change in their tactics. They underestimated how far humanity had come. On the USS Perseverance, Anders took a deep breath. Prepare for a surprise, Admiral Zorath. You've just made your first mistake. The moment had arrived. The USS Perseverance and its fleet of 4 ships moved silently through the dark expanse of space, their cloaking devices activated. For the first time since the encounter, the human crew felt the heavy weight of their own resolve. They had taken the first step, jamming the Empire's communications and slipping unnoticed into the shadows of the galaxy. On the bridge of the USS Perseverance, Captain Anders stood tall, his hands steady on the armrests of his command chair. He watched the view screen intently, the Empire's fleet looming in the distance. The giant ships of the Galactic Empire were unaware of the threat approaching them. Humans were not going to simply retreat, no matter how much the Empire mocked them. They would show the galaxy that humanity could think, adapt, and fight when it mattered. Lieutenant Reese, Anders called. Status on the jammer? Reese, his eyes glued to his console, nodded without turning away. The jamming field is active, Captain. Their communications are completely blocked for the next 5 minutes. We have a limited window. Anders took a deep breath. Good. Once they lose contact with each other, we strike. We'll use their own size against them. Spread the fleet out. Give them targets they don't know how to handle. Reese didn't need to be told twice. The ships moved into position, spreading out across the darkness of space in a wide, deceptive pattern. They were not rushing in for a direct confrontation. Instead, they were creating confusion, scattering their forces to mislead the Empire's sensors and keeping them guessing. It was risky, but it was the only option they had. As the fleet continued to move silently, Anders noticed the growing tension in the faces of his crew. Every second they spent hiding felt like an eternity. The countdown to the inevitable clash was almost upon them. Then, without warning, the communication systems crackled to life again. But this time, it wasn't from the Empire's fleet. It was a human transmission. This is Captain Anders, he said, his voice steady, calm and confident. We've entered the Empire's territory. Now it's time to show them we're not afraid. We fight not with size or brute force, but with intelligence. His words echoed across the crew's comm systems, reassuring everyone on board. Anders wasn't just talking to his crew, he was talking to himself too. There was no turning back now. They were in the thick of it. The moment was coming. Suddenly, the sensors on the bridge flared, and the view screen displayed a barrage of lights, shifting. Beams of light and flickering signals. The Empire's massive ships were finally beginning to notice their movement. Anders quickly snapped his gaze to Reese. "They're scrambling," Reese said, typing rapidly on his console. "They've figured out something's wrong, but they're not entirely sure what we're doing yet." Anders nodded. "Then let's keep them guessing. Turn on the stealth modules. Let's make them think we're everywhere." Reese nodded and activated the fleet's next tactic. The human ship's cloaking systems powered up again, masking their presence in different parts of the galaxy. The Empire's sensors were picking up multiple false signatures now. Human ships that weren't actually there, creating confusion and hesitation among their ranks. The Empire was beginning to panic, unsure of where to strike first. On the Empire's flagship, Admiral Zorath stood before a massive holographic display. His officers watched in silence, unsure of how to proceed. Their fleet had been thrown into disarray. The humans, though outmatched in firepower and size, had displayed a cleverness that Zorath had not anticipated. "Admiral," said Commander Rylus, her voice filled with concern, "the humans are using some kind of decoy system. We can't lock onto their true position." Zorath's face hardened. "I told you they would be insignificant. They're nothing more than a nuisance. But I see now they've proven more resourceful than we imagined." Despite his harsh words, Zorath couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The humans were up to something. Their little fleet was far more dangerous than he had thought. Anders watched the movements of the Empire's ships closely, on the view screen. They were scattered, unsure of what was going on. Their usual confidence was now replaced with uncertainty. That was when Anders gave the order. "Now," he said, his voice low but filled with purpose. The human ships fired their weapons in perfect synchronization, their smaller, faster craft darting in and out of the Empire's formation. The Empire's ships were slow to react, their massive lumbering bodies unable to adjust quickly enough to the speed and precision of the human fleet. It was a deliberate, calculated move, one that surprised the Empire. The first blast hit an Empire cruiser's side, shaking its massive hull. The cruiser's shields flared bright, but they were not strong enough to absorb the human ship's carefully aimed pulse cannons. The explosion sent shock waves through the surrounding ships. Zorath's eyes widened as he watched the live feed from his ship. "What are they doing?" he muttered half to himself. The humans were attacking, but they weren't making any attempt at an all-out assault. Instead, they were hitting key areas of his fleet, taking out specific weapon systems and destabilizing shield generators. The humans were picking their targets with perfect precision. On the USS Perseverance, Anders stood at the helm, his gaze unwavering. "Reese, full power to the engines. We'll keep them on the move, don't give them a chance to regroup." "Aye, Captain," Reese replied, quickly adjusting the ship's speed and course. The humans were small, fast, and relentless. While the Empire's ships struggled to target the human ships, Anders and his crew moved with purpose, their weapons accurate and precise. They weren't trying to destroy the entire fleet, they were trying to cripple it piece by piece. A few shots to the right places and they could change the entire outcome of this encounter. As the battle continued to unfold, Zorath's frustration grew. His once invincible fleet was being torn apart by human ingenuity. The battle was no longer about brute strength, it was about who could outthink the other. And at this moment, it was clear that the Empire's overconfidence was their greatest weakness. "Pull back," Zorath finally shouted. "Get the fleet into formation, we'll take them down with sheer force." But it was too late. The human ships, though fewer in number, had already planted the seed of doubt. The Empire was not as invincible as they had once believed. Anders' voice echoed through the comms once more, calm and steady. "This isn't over, Zorath. But we've just shown you the first step. Humans don't back down, and we never will. The clash in space continued, but now it was clear that the Empire was faltering. The huge, intimidating warships of the Galactic Empire, once so confident in their superiority, were now vulnerable to the agility and cunning of the human fleet. Captain Anders stood at the helm of the USS Perseverance, his eyes fixed on the chaos unfolding before him. The Empire had expected a quick victory, but they had underestimated the one thing that humans did better than anyone else: surviving, against all odds. Admiral Zorath's flagship, the Emperor's Wrath, trembled from the impact of another blast. Anders had ordered his fleet to target the weak spots in the Empire's ships, taking out their engines, destabilizing their shields, and hitting their weapon systems with surgical precision. The Empire's massive ships, designed for overwhelming force, were too slow to adapt to the fast-moving human ships. "Keep the pressure on them," Anders said, his voice calm but filled with determination. "We're not going to give them a chance to regroup." The human ships moved in and out of the Empire's formations, always staying one step ahead. They fired a few precise shots, then darted away before the Empire's ships could retaliate. The Empire's fleet was beginning to break apart, its ships scattered and vulnerable. "We've hit their comms and engines on several ships," Lieutenant Reese reported, his voice steady as ever. "The Empire is trying to coordinate, but their signals are all over the place. They can't organize themselves." Anders smiled slightly, his eyes never leaving the view screen. The Empire had always relied on their size and firepower, but the humans had shown them that strategy and speed could overcome raw power. The human fleet was small, but each ship was a carefully honed instrument of war, designed for efficiency, not sheer force. On the bridge of the Emperor's Wrath, Admiral Zorath seethed with frustration. His fleet, once a symbol of the Empire's might, was now in disarray. His officers, who had once been so confident, were now scrambling to try and regain control. Zorath's mind raced as he tried to figure out how to deal with this unexpected challenge. "Admiral, the humans are disrupting our communications," said Commander Rylus, her voice tight with anxiety. "We can't track their movements properly. They're everywhere, and nowhere at the same time." Zorath's eyes burned with anger, but there was also a flicker of realization. "They're using decoys," he muttered. "They've been scattering their forces in such a way that we can't target them properly. The humans are clever." He turned to face his officers. "We need to stop this now. Bring all ships into tight formation. We'll concentrate our firepower on one target at a time. We'll crush them under our guns." It was a typical response from the Empire. They believed that brute strength could solve everything. Zorath had been so sure that the humans would crumble under the weight of the Empire's power. But now they were facing a different kind of threat, one that didn't rely on overwhelming firepower, but on precision, speed, and adaptability. The USS Perseverance moved gracefully through the battlefield, narrowly dodging enemy fire as it weaved between the massive Empire ships. Anders watched the Empire's attempts to form a counterattack, but they were too late. The humans had already anticipated their move. "Reese, target their command ship," Anders ordered. "It's their only chance to regroup. If we take it out, they'll fall apart." Reese's fingers danced over the console, quickly calculating the trajectory of the attack. "Target locked, Captain. Firing in 3, 2, 1. The USS Perseverance fired a single shot, the beam slicing through the darkness of space. It hit the Emperor's Wrath dead center, and for a brief moment everything seemed to freeze. Then an explosion rippled across the enemy ship's hull. The Emperor's Wrath staggered, its shields faltering as the ship's engines went into disarray. Zorath's eyes widened in shock. "No, they've taken out our engines," he shouted. "All units, fall back. I want all ships focusing on the Perseverance." But it was too late. The damage had been done. The Empire's command ship was crippled, and the rest of the fleet was left scrambling. Without proper coordination, the Empire's massive ships were slow and unwieldy. The human ships, small and nimble, darted in and out, striking at the heart of the Empire's fleet with deadly accuracy. Anders watched the scene unfold on the view screen. The Empire was falling apart. The once mighty Galactic fleet was now nothing more than a collection of disorganized ships, The humans had done it. They had turned the tables on the Empire, and now the tables were turning with terrifying speed. "Reese," Anders said, his voice firm, "prepare the fleet for the final push. We've got them where we want them." The human ships moved into formation surrounding the scattered Empire fleet. The Empire, once the dominant force in the galaxy, was now surrounded by a smaller, but far more efficient force. On the Emperor's wrath, Zorath clenched his fists in fury. His fleet was a mess, and the humans had taken full advantage of every opening. "This can't be happening," he whispered. "We are the Empire, we don't lose." But as the human fleet closed in, Zorath realized the truth. The Empire had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. "Captain, all ships are in position," Reese reported. "They're finished." Anders nodded, his eyes never leaving the view screen. "Prepare to strike, let's finish this." The human fleet fired their final volleys, targeting the remaining weak points in the Empire's ships. The explosions were bright against the blackness of space, a testament to the precision of the human attack. The Empire's ships, once so sure of their power, were now floating wrecks in space. The Emperor's wrath, now crippled beyond repair, drifted in space, its hull scarred and smoking. The Empire's fleet had been shattered, and their once proud dominance had been reduced to nothing. Anders exhaled slowly, his chest swelling with pride. The humans had done it. They had proven that they weren't to be underestimated. Against all odds, they had turned the tables on the Galactic Empire. The battle was over, but the message was clear. Humanity was no longer a footnote in the history of the galaxy. They were a force to be reckoned with. The silence of space hung heavily around the battlefield. The once mighty Galactic Empire's fleet was now nothing more than scattered wreckage, drifting helplessly in the cold vacuum. The USS Perseverance and its accompanying human ships floated in space, their engines humming softly as they surveyed the damage. The stars above them seemed to shine brighter, as if the universe itself had taken notice of the humans' victory. Captain Anders stood on the bridge, his gaze fixed on the view screen, where the remnants of the Empire's fleet flickered. The battle was over, and humanity had emerged victorious. It had been a hard-fought fight, but in the end the human ships had done what many thought impossible. They had outsmarted and outmaneuvered one of the most powerful empires the galaxy had ever seen. "We did it," Lieutenant Reese said, breaking the silence. "We actually did it." Anders nodded slowly. "Yes, we did, but this isn't over. The Empire will not take this lightly. We need to send a message, one they will never forget." Reese turned to face him. "What's our next move, Captain?" Anders took a deep breath, his expression firm. "We've shown them that humanity won't back down. We've made our point, but we need to secure this victory. We need to make sure the galaxy knows we're not just a fluke." He turned to the rest of his crew. "Prepare the fleet for a message to the galaxy. We're sending a signal that will be heard across the stars." Meanwhile, on the Emperor's wrath, Admiral Zorath was not in the mood for silence. His flagship, once the pride of the Empire, was now a hollow shell, barely held together after the devastating blows from the human fleet. His officers were silent, each one knowing how close the Empire had come to losing everything. They had underestimated the humans, and now they had paid the price. Zorath stood before the shattered remains of his command center, his anger boiling beneath the surface. His empire was a vast and powerful force, yet one small human fleet had torn it apart. The humiliation was unbearable. "We will not forget this," Zorath muttered to himself. "We will rebuild, and when we do, we will make them regret this day." Commander Rylus approached him cautiously. "Admiral, the fleet is in disarray. We've lost contact with several of our ships, and many are too damaged to continue fighting. What do we do now?" Zorath turned to face her, his eyes filled with fury. "We pull back, we regroup, and we prepare for a counterattack. The humans have made their point, but this isn't over, not by a long shot." He clenched his fists. "This will be remembered as the day the Empire underestimated Earth. We will return, and when we do, we will crush them." Back on the USS Perseverance, Captain Anders was giving his final orders. The human fleet had already begun transmitting a message to the galaxy, one that would make the Empire think twice before ever underestimating humanity again. Lieutenant Reese, transmit the message to all major galactic channels, Anders ordered. Reese nodded, his fingers flying over the console. Message is ready to go, Captain. It's being broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. Anders stepped forward, his voice strong and clear as he spoke into the ship's comm system. This is Captain Anders of the USS Perseverance, speaking on behalf of Earth and humanity. Today we have proven that we are not the weaklings the galaxy has assumed us to be. We are not to be underestimated. The Galactic Empire came to our doorstep, thinking that they could destroy us. They were wrong. We have shown them that humanity has the will to fight, to adapt, and to survive. This is only the beginning. We will not back down. We will not surrender. And we will fight, not with sheer strength, but with the strength of our minds, our hearts, and our resolve. The message echoed across the galaxy, broadcasting a powerful signal of defiance. Across many star systems, the inhabitants of distant worlds watched in awe. The Empire's loss had shaken the galaxy, but the rise of humanity had sparked something even greater, a realization that perhaps the Empire was not invincible after all. Anders looked out at the stars, his heart swelling with pride. Humanity had proven itself today. They had shown the galaxy that they were a force to be reckoned with, not by sheer firepower, but by their ability to think, to strategize, and to fight with everything they had. Captain, Reese said, his voice breaking through Anders's thoughts, we've received a response. Anders turned back to the console. From who? It's a message from the Galactic Council, Reese said, his eyes wide with surprise. They want to speak with us. Anders felt a surge of curiosity and caution. The Galactic Council was the governing body that oversaw all galactic affairs, a powerful organization that had once ruled with an iron fist. The fact that they were reaching out to humanity now, after what had just happened, spoke volumes. Patch the message through, Anders ordered. The screen flickered to life, and an official-looking figure appeared on the screen. He wore the robes of the Galactic Council, and his face was serious, though there was an undeniable hint of respect in his eyes. I am Chancellor Oren of the Galactic Council, the figure said, his voice calm yet firm. Captain Anders, your actions today have not gone unnoticed. The defeat of the Empire's fleet is unprecedented. We are extending an offer for negotiations. Anders raised an eyebrow. Negotiations? Yes, Chancellor Oren continued. While the Empire may have been the dominant force in the galaxy, your actions have shown that humanity is not to be ignored. We wish to discuss a future of cooperation, one where Earth's influence can be part of a new order, free from the tyranny of the Empire. Anders exchanged a look with Lieutenant Reese and the rest of his crew. This was a momentous offer, one that could change everything for humanity. But it also meant that the galaxy was watching, waiting to see if humanity would rise to meet the challenge. I'll be in touch with you soon, Anders said, his voice steady. We'll consider your offer. As the transmission ended, Anders leaned back in his chair, his thoughts racing. The fight with the Empire was far from over, but humanity had just made its mark on the galaxy. And now they had a seat at the table. The battle for humanity's place in the galaxy was only just beginning. But for the first time in history, Earth had proven that it was no longer a mere bystander. It was a force to be reckoned with. And the galaxy would never forget the day they laughed at humanity, and humanity rose up to show them what they were truly capable of.